here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the Pittsburgh-based band, the Cynics, because I recently spoke to their lead vocalist, Michael Kastelic, to find out more about life, love and poetry and all that other groovy stuff. So after several minutes of interesting but slightly casual chat, it was quite casual but fascinating, we got down to that interesting question or point, the early formative years. Michael, tell us about your early formative years.
Well, it's very interesting. We're about the same age, and I can't believe what you just said, because I think we have a lot in common as David Bowie being the gateway drug. Because,
Yes.
you know, even when I was in high school and grade school bands and stuff, people were always like into rock, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath. I mean, I could stomach Led Zeppelin because Jimmy Page was an interesting guitar player, but I was never really into rock at all. But when I first saw in 1974, I guess I was like 9 or 10, the 1984 David Bowie floor show. Even though it was 1974, it was called the 1980. It was right before Diamond Dogs came out, and he did a special on American TV here called it was a show called the Midnight Special, and it was an hour and a half of just this guy David Bowie, and I had never seen such a thing in my life. I'm like, well, I'm like, screw everything else. This is what it's about. And then, you know, Bowie became the gateway drug to my discovering Roxy Music and Peter Hamill and Brian Eno and, you know, all that amazing stuff that just, you know, totally blew my mind, and I found, you know, endlessly more fascinating than rock and roll. I mean, you know, I even before David Bowie, I was always more interested in like a strange person that I heard, Lou Reed, and even the Stooges. I even heard, you know, as a kid, and I'm like, well, this is much more interesting than. But of course, I was
Yes.
lucky enough to have access to there was a local independently owned radio station where there are a couple DJs that would play stuff like that, and I was like, oh, where can I get that? And so then, you know, I went to this record store. And lo and behold, you know, they had that stuff that was kind of a meeting place for us weirdos who are into music that you could only get at like one store, because at that time it was all, you know, expensive imports. You know,
Yes.
you couldn't like go to you know, the National Record Mart and like find all the whole Lou Reed collection, or I mean, Roxy Music, forget about it. It was all just imports on EG Records. You know, I don't even know if Roxy really had any American releases at that time, like in the early 70s. But anyway,
Yes.
so we share that 70s thing that was really a gateway to just unbelievable, mind-blowing music. I mean, I can't believe all these people that come on your show and they're like, oh, well, I heard the Beatles and they changed my life. I don't know. I was a kid when I heard the Beatles, and I know this is controversial, but I always thought they sounded like a bunch of rubbish. I'm like, they sound like a bunch of chipmunks singing. I don't get this at all. That
No.
being said, later in life, I love Wings. I love George Harrison's solo stuff. I like a lot of John Lennon's solo stuff. But them as a group, they never really seemed to move me. And then as I grew older and older, like every time I would hear a Beatles song, I just wanted to vomit, because even by the time I was a mid-teen, I had already heard every Beatles song like a million zillion times. I'm like, really? Do we have to hear them again? Just enough of them, right? You know?
Yes. I think with our generation, they would just kind of, they had finished and there was the odd Beatles film that would appear on telly, which looked kind of exciting. But we had the Monkees as well, which was also quite an exciting TV program at the time, and the Banana Splits that seemed incredibly exotic and interesting. So there was that going on. And I suppose the 60s for me, that latter part was probably a lot of it spent in the kitchen with my mum during the late 60s, listening to it was called Radio 2 on the BBC, and it was kind of light music, but some of it had a massive impact on my life. Things like Burt Bacharach and the Carpenters, those kind of sentimental lyrics they've always resonated with me for some reason. As a small child, hearing Karen Carpenter sing Rainy Days and Mondays kind of made me sort of like, did something to me, which obviously, you know, in later life, I liked Joy Division and the Smiths. And I thought, oh, yes, lyrically, I can see there's some continuation here. So
Well,
there.
it's great songwriting. I mean, I still, uh, anytime I hear pretty much any Joni Mitchell song, I can just spontaneously just burst into tears, you know, whether it's
Yes.
one of her happy songs or whether it's one of her emotional songs, just the pure lyricism of it, not to mention her incredibly weird choices of tuning and guitar playing and tuning on the piano and stuff. It's really not only original, it's just like I don't know, for some reason it really strikes a note with me, you know.
Yes. Well,
So yeah, Joni Mitchell is up there as my okay. I
you'll
wouldn't
go.
say an influence. I guess it is an influence because I mean I could never do anything like she did. And I mean I'm not afraid to sing like a girl, but I could never sing like she does or have my mind work the way she does. But it really, you know, touched me way more than the Beatles, I guess.
The Beatles. I know.
I guess I'm an old hippie.
Yes. But what did you grow up in Pittsburgh then? Was this your sort of hometown?
Well, I was born and partly raised in St. Louis, Missouri. And thank God my dad got a job that we moved out of there when I was like in sixth grade. Not sure what that would be in England, but early grade school. Because if I think I would have stayed in St. Louis, I think I would have went insane. I don't know if you know about American politics, but Missouri is like in the Midwestern part of our country, and it's like an insane red state now. I think if I would have lived there, I either would have become a insane right-wing Republican, or I would have just killed myself, or I don't know
Yes.
what. But thank God we moved to Pittsburgh when I was quite young, and I grew up in a very comfortable upper middle class family.
Mm.
My dad, when we moved here, he was you know, started off as a public accountant, CPA, and then he worked his way all the way up into being like a executive vice president of a very large bank in Pittsburgh. So we were quite comfortable living in the suburbs, and that
Yes.
was the years that I'm talking about. You know, my you know, a little bit mid to later teens when, you know, discovering Bowie during the 70s. And I was in bands, you know, I don't know, since we moved to Pittsburgh, I was lucky enough to, you know, find some kids. Of course, there's no internet or anything. I think we would just put up things like in the grocery store, like a little piece of paper with a tack in it and say, I would be like, singer looking for a band, or I would take one off that said, band looking for a singer. And
Yes.
so I went out for a lot of these tryout things. And by gone out for the tryouts, I mean I had my mom or dad drive me to
Yes.
these weird places, sometimes really far from where we lived, and just drop me off. And usually they would just wait outside in the car for me to go in and do my audition and stuff. And either come out and like, that didn't work out, or they come back and are like, wow, that was really cool. Usually come out like rather stoned because, you know, it was the 70s. It was, you
Yes.
know, we were no, even though we were like just barely teenagers, marijuana was of course ubiquitous then, so that was of course part of it. But okay, what were you asking? Oh, how
So
I grew up. Yeah. Anyway, I was
Pittsburgh.
very lucky enough to be in Pittsburgh because there was a scene then that started to develop of actual and early punk rock scene, and then I started hanging out with older kids that were older than me and were even in like college. And luckily here we had a very liberal college. I think it still is kind of liberal, CMU, Carnegie Mellon University. And so I started hanging out with people from there who I got to be in bands with. One of them being Bill Von Hagen, who later became the original drummer of the Cynics. But even before that, I was in a few bands with them, you know, just fooling around and stuff. And I was just this, you know, 14, 15-year-old snot kid. And I was like, this will be fun. And I was just
Yes.
totally enamored with them, right? So, and they loved me too. They go, oh, little boat boy, they called me, because I was in a band called the Boat People, you know,
Right.
ironically named after the Vietnamese boat people. We thought it'd be hilarious. But and we ended up starting to play with these punk rock bands, even though we were more like Vandergraaf Generator. I mean, we weren't like hard rock, but we were trying to do like more of a pantograph generator, kind of not prog rock either, kind of I don't know. I guess some sort of hybrid because we didn't even know what the hell we were doing. But anyway, these bands started letting us play at these. There weren't even venues then, because I don't know if you remember back then, there were no clubs or venues that would let any band play that did original material. That was
Yes.
verboten, at least in Pittsburgh. So yeah, just played house shows and basements, or like church basements and stuff that we would rent out from the AA meetings or something, and just rent them out. And there'd be like 5 bands, 6 bands, punk rock bands. We played a lot. The boat people would play a lot because we were the only ones that had a PA system. We were the kids from the suburbs, and we had convinced our parents to buy us this beautiful Altec, huge giant Altec speakers and a nice Tapco mixer and amps and stuff. So we were the only band that actually had a PA system. Otherwise, at any of those shows, the PA system had to be rented out by the bands or whoever's putting on the show. But we had our own PA system, so they would always invite us to be on the bill as long as we bought our PA for free.
Yes.
So
So
anyway, it all
yes,
just
you had youth,
worked out.
and so just with Pittsburgh at that stage. I mean, obviously, you probably realise everyone's going to mention the Andy Warhol connection. Was there much of an Andy vibe during the 70s at that period, or the late 60s, or was that still too early for his legacy to have much effect?
I don't think his legacy was noticed in Pittsburgh per se, but it was certainly noticed by us and anyone in the punk rock scene, of course. I mean, just by dint of the Velvet Underground, everyone knew Andy Warhol was. But also, CMU, once again, Carnegie Mellon University, the college that I was talking about, Andy Warhol went there. So there was always this presence of Andy Warhol in Pittsburgh. As far as his legacy being cemented, it was pretty funny when they actually made the official Andy Warhol Museum here in Pittsburgh. And people in New York were all up in arms. Well, why would it be in Pittsburgh? I'm like, why not? I always joke, but people say, hey, should I visit Pittsburgh? Is there anything worth seeing there? And I'm like, well, the Andy Warhol Museum and the airport when you leave.
Yes.
But anyway, his legacy is kind of cemented here, even though I don't, people are really aware of, his importance or not. But we do have official museum is right here, like, not too far from my house, like half a mile.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. At least they probably do a quality coffee, don't they? And other nice little bits at the I don't know, the tourist shop. Really, we all go towards the tourist shop, don't we? Quite quickly. Well, the toilet first, but yes. So then, when you got to that delicate age of 15, which was probably, I don't know, 1975, were you going to sort of stayed in college, or were you already thinking you were going to sort of branch out and do music at that point?
I went to college for 2.5, actually, I think about 3 years before I dropped out. And that was just because, I just stopped going and I was just more involved in staying up all night and playing in different various bands and stuff. And so I'm not regretful of the time I spent in college. I think I really, really learned a lot. But I think at that point I was like, even if I do finish it, it's just going to cost a whole bunch of money for when already knew what I was going to do since I was 9. So I'm not really sure what this is for, but it was, of course, good to know, learn stuff about literature and poetry. And the best thing about college is learning, having some good professors. And I was lucky enough to have some that would teach critical thinking. Like, I think one of the greatest classes I ever had was called rhetoric. And I'm like, that sounds interesting. What the hell is it going to be? But it was mainly just him teaching us, how to critically think about things like subliminal advertising. Does it really exist? Can people be that dumb to be swayed by it? Well, not if you use your brain. You can figure out seeing somebody naked in an ice cube or seeing a naked man on the front of a Camel cigarette pack isn't going to make you want to smoke. But we would talk about stuff like that, and to be able to look at things and decide what is just blatant lies and marketing unfortunately, I think that art has been totally lost, at least here in the United States, because people have absolutely no idea who's a sham and who's not, and they don't really care to find out. It's just intellectual laziness. So I think, yeah,
Yes.
what I learned from college is not to be intellectually lazy. No matter how much you feel like it, don't tune out. No matter
No.
how nauseous it makes you and how nervous and upset it makes you, you have to remain tuned into what's going on. Otherwise, what's the point?
Absolutely, no. And what was your first album or first single that you bought during the 70s with your own hard-earned money? What was the first kind of, yes, moment that you thought, right, that's it, I'm going into the shop with some dollars, I'm going to buy this record?
Well, I wouldn't call it my own hard-earned money because, of course, it was money that my mom or dad gave me. But going into the Woolworths or whatever, where singles like 99 cents, and buying like Jethro Tull Bungle in the Jungle or something, just silly stuff like that. When you're a kid, "Ooh." And this was way before I was a teenager. When it's just a little kid. You go and buy singles and stuff. Yeah, some you heard on the radio, like. I don't know, some stupid disco thing like Casey and the Sunshine Band or stuff.
Right, nice.
But the first music and singles and albums that I had were not paid for by me or paid for by anyone. They were actually contraband that was intercepted by my grandfather on my dad's side. Pop, we called him. He worked his way at Granite City, Illinois, which was like barely an hour from where we grew up in St. Louis, Illinois. So my dad's parents lived in this little small town, Granite City, Illinois, right in the St. Louis border there, St. Louis, Missouri. And he would worked his way all the way up to be a detective and like chief of the police in Granite City. But anyway, long story short, there was some robbery there at this radio station in Granite City, Illinois. Oh my goodness, intrigue.
Hmm.
And then they caught the guy that broke into the radio station, and they found all these boxes of records that he had stolen from the radio station, which were then confiscated by the police. And apparently they never made it back to the radio station because my grandfather Pop had him in his house, and he's like, "Oh, I saved these for Michael. He likes dancing and music stuff. Maybe he might like them." And I'm going through these albums, and I'm like, "Oh, it's the first one that struck my eye." Well, the Rascals, the Young Rascals, but then the one that really struck my eye was one called the Best of Eric Burden and the Animals, Volume 2. And I was like,
Oh,
"Oh, this is a neat cover. It's like some little pictures of animals and whatever." And I put that on my little, I think it was like a Kmart. It wasn't a close and play, but it was one of those little tiny little blue record players. And that needle hit the groove. And the first song on that album, song one, Best of Eric Bird and the Animals, Volume 2, was when I was young, right? When I was young. I'm like, holy guacamole. This is just life changing. And then I worked my way through all those records, which were, of a piece of that time. A bunch of singles were like, you're talking about the Banana Splits, but in there was all those Kama Sutra singles of like Chewy, Chewy, Chew, all the 1910 Fruit Company stuff.
yes.
And which was, just pure bubblegum pop. And I don't even know if they were actually real bands. I think it was all studio. But just the songwriting, they were just so funny. They were like children's songs, but I thought way more entertaining than the Beatles. Okay, well, I won't go back into that.
Yes,
But
well, yeah,
I
absolutely.
thought Chewy Chewy was way better than I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yes, that's good. It's always good to have a definite opinion and rather than sitting on the fence. Did you, I mean, was Pittsburgh, did it have any kind of heavy vibe around the sort of the streets of Pittsburgh? Any sort of gangs or mafia or anybody like that sort of lurking in the shadows?
I'm not sure what you mean. Vibes?
No, no sort of heavy kind of, gangs or, during that sort of 60s and 70s period. What was Pittsburgh like in terms of sort of, because in this country you had different gangs, you had bikers, you had, I don't know, Teds, people like that. Did Pittsburgh have a sort of, did you have to be quite careful on the streets of Pittsburgh at all, or was it quite a safe place to grow up in?
Only in the ways that, when my friends and I started, getting into punk rock and stuff, and would be dyeing our hair, with polka dots in it and stuff. And at that point, when you would go, not downtown, but even in the college area, there were people that would start yelling at you and make you feel physically threatened because they'd be yelling things like "Devo, Devo, faggot, faggot." Meanwhile, I'm walking down the street with flanked by girls, but just because we had dyed hair or something, they seemed to think that I guess maybe those girls are faggots. But yeah, he was only partly right. But but yeah, so there was that kind of vibe, but it was never really. I mean, I was beaten up a few times. I was rolled a few times, a couple times just for my hair. But that was more even actually more in the suburbs than the city. But no, there were no. I don't think there was any gang thing going on.
No, there's nothing sort of so towards. And
No.
what was your first gig apart from the? I mean, you said punk gigs and local bands. Was there anything major that you first went to that sort of blew your mind? A bit like your Eric Burton moment. And when I was young, was there a live band that you went to see quite early on that had a massive impact?
Live band. I remember one of my first concerts was Kiss, and my dad took me because I begged him and pleaded with him, and he got tickets somehow from some friend at the advertising firm, and he took me to go see Kiss, Bob Seger opening. My dad liked Bob Seger, by the way,
Yes.
and I mean, he liked him after he saw him. He didn't know who he was. He did not care for Kiss, and I was like, I don't know, I'm kind of on board with you with that. They were a little much, and I don't know. It was funny. The funny story out of that was I was there in my platform boots or whatever, and watching Kiss and stuff. And at that time, no smoking in the arena, no cigarettes allowed. Blah blah blah. Meanwhile, the whole arena's filled with pot smoke, and plus the smoke from the flash pots while Kiss is playing. And Bob Seger. And so my dad looks around and he's like, "Well, what do you mean no smoking?" So he pulls a cigar out of his pocket. He's a cigar smoker, banker, and
Yes.
he lit up the cigar. And someone like tapped him on the shoulder, and he sees me and he sees my dad, and he goes, "Hey, are you his pop?" And my dad thought he said, "Hey, are you a cop?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm his pop."
Oh,
And then
right.
this guy also turns around and like hands my dad a joint. And my dad's like, "No, no, no." I think actually that's the point where my dad just pulled out a cigar and lit it. But anyway,
Yes.
so yeah, that was the first concert, but it wasn't really like a life changer to me. Trying to think first live band that I don't know. I think a lot
Yes.
of them because back then we would go see everything because it was really cheap. Me and my friends who could drive before I did, we would just go see. Didn't matter whether it was REO Speedwagon or Jefferson Starship, or it didn't matter whether we even liked the band or not. We would just go to get out of the house and smoke pot in a venue. You know,
Yes.
we didn't really
Absolutely.
care that much who the band was. The experience was being more out and being with your friends and getting stoned and stuff. But it's
Yes.
amazing we ever made it back home or even lived, and now that I think about it. But then again, when I think about anything that's happened in my life, I always think it's amazing that I'm alive. I
I think
really do.
I think it's quite interesting the difference between the UK and America in the sense of just that whole scale and the distance involved between different places. Because in this country, as you can imagine, turns out to be absolutely tiny, doesn't it? It's like it's been shrunk in the wash. And so,
Mm.
when a band
Yeah.
sort of would get their little transit vehicle and then sort of travel around the countryside, or from one town to the other, you realize that actually
Hmm.
you can get from sort of London to Birmingham to Leeds to Manchester to Glasgow quite
Hmm.
quickly. Whereas I spoke to people in America, they said, "Oh, yes, we had to drive 8 hours to go and see a punk band or some band that they were desperate." And I think 8 hours, my God, I
Hmm.
felt suddenly quite bad and slightly guilty in the fact that I would have never, well, I wouldn't have done it in this country. Perhaps it's different when you're used to that sense of, okay, we're just going to have to get in the car and drive 8 hours to go and see the Clash or something like that. Whereas, yes, we were quite lazy, but as you can imagine, most British bands who, when they tour America, get completely hammered and can't quite believe this sort of the physical grueling experience it is, as well as emotional and spiritual of touring America. So it's a different trip, isn't it? Really, as you can
Oh my
imagine.
God, yeah. Whenever we tour America, we're like, just oh my God, okay. So you have to go from state to state, and some of our states are bigger than the entire EU. You
Yes.
know, if you try to drive from one end of Texas to the other, I mean, talk about being wiped out and, just mentally bombarded by idiocy. But besides that, yeah, it is. Yeah, it's touring is very different in Europe than it is in the United States,
So
and
what would
definitely for me more pleasurable in Europe. And we've always got a better response in Europe than we ever did in the States. So.
Yes, yes. I think we, especially in the UK, we always found it kind of exciting to discover an American band, and we always felt like, oh, that was my band, and I've discovered it, and yeah, I think yeah, and a lot of people. I don't know. I spoke to a few people recently, actually, from a band who, yeah, they were sort of one of them was talking about being I suppose he was part of a record management deal, which meant that he would get sort of British bands over to America, and then he would be there, sort of like I don't know, navigate them through the America, and then it would work the other way, like Jimi Hendrix coming to the UK, didn't he? And being part of Chaz Chandler's kind of management and getting Noel Redding and Mitch
Ah.
Mitchell, and then sort of became big in Britain, then went back to America and was like Jimi Hendrix. So, yeah, sometimes going the other side of the pond can help your career, can't it? So you never know. It's all good. So what did the punk period do for you then when you started seeing people like the Ramones and the Damned and the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Buzzcocks and such bands? Did that have a big impact on your sort of musical kind of direction?
Well, it's interesting because I was lucky enough to see the Ramones in 1977. I still have my ticket stubs. That was once again, I was 14 years old in 1977. And I was in, bands with some high schoolers, a couple of whom had a driver's license. The Ramones were playing here 4 shows, two on a Friday, two on a Saturday, on in a little tiny pizza place called Antonino's Pizza. And I was like, okay, I heard these guys on WYP. We got to go. We got it. And of course, we also were lucky enough to be able to have access to really cool magazines. Like, no matter where you were from in America, you could find, if you wanted to, do the research yourself. Yeah, you could find Cream magazine, Circus magazine called Rock Scene, Hit
Yes.
Parader, and they would always do interviews or stories on the Ramones. Or
Oh, you've just gone dead there. Are you still there? Oh my God, don't go down. Have you just hit your I'll just hit
I'm sorry.
yes. Phew,
Yeah,
that
I'm
was
sorry. I'm such an idiot. Trying to hold the phone, I hit mute. I mean,
mute.
isn't that what happens with the Zoomies? But yeah, we got the Rock Scene, Hit Parader, all this magazine stuff that you wouldn't read about in Rolling Stone, for God's sakes. These little magazines like Cream and stuff would be following,
Yes.
Ramones, Patti Smith. Oh my God, But anyway, you talk about the influence of punk rock. For me, original punk rock, was of course the Stooges, but especially New York stuff, originally, the Velvet Underground. But to me, real punk rock was the New York stuff. Television, Patti Smith, Richard Hell, Ramones. And the one thing that all those bands had in common was they had really nothing in common. Patti Smith didn't sound like the Ramones. Richard Hell didn't sound like not the other band, or like Richard Hell didn't sound like the New York Dolls or Johnny Thunders. Television. I mean, all these bands had, very unique sounds. And then when punk rock became like a more marketable thing, I think is when the Brits started doing it. I mean, pardon my incredulous nature, but I thought it was pretty much like a bunch of poofters. I mean, the Sex Pistols. Never mind, the Bullocks is fine, but I'm like, they're just rehashing the New York Dolls, right? What the hell? I mean, there were really great bands like the Buzzcocks and stuff that, just amazing pop stuff. But I pretty much was like not really that big on the British music. That being said, I've been such a hypocrite because I love the Bowie and Roxy Music and all the British bands, even the British prog rock bands I love. But a lot of the punk British bands like kind of left me cold. I'm like, why are they doing this? It seems more like a fashion thing for the Brits. But then it's even early on, then, like even as early as '76 and stuff, there were a lot of bands that emerged from the British scene that were more the actual innovators of what became known as post-punk,
Yes.
not new wave, but post-punk, like The Fall and Joy Division and this sort of darker Manchester stuff. And a lot of bands that, they emerged from the poofter Brit rock thing became these really sort of amazing post-punk bands with a more jagged, edgy feel, like Wire, stuff like that.
Yes. And and there's the Gang of Four and another band
Oh
called
my
them.
God. Oh, Gang of Four. That's the best. That's a live band I saw when I was quite young. Oh, we were also lucky because Pittsburgh, you could drive to Cleveland in like a couple hours. And so we would be able to drive to Cleveland and see these shows at some place called the Pop Shop where The Fall would play and Gang of Four and even American bands like Todd Rundgren. So we were lucky to have that available to us. Even though the Americans are spread out, Pittsburgh is in a very good position because it only takes like 5 hours to drive to New York City. You're in the middle of Manhattan. Only takes a few hours to drive to Cleveland. Chicago is a little longer drive, but we're in a central place where we can drive to all the larger cities on the East Coast, at least.
Yes. Did you go to Boston much? Because I know they had quite a scene, didn't they? There was a book that came out a few years ago, and a photographer sort of said all these sort of British bands would go and American bands. That was it. It was called, yes, this photographer
We
sort of,
Some friends of mine went to see the Fall. I think once or twice they played in Boston, and but Boston was a little further drive from us because that's like up north, and it's a further drive. But I never really, knew any bands that were in the Boston scene or anything. I mean, not until maybe the '90s. But no,
so
I never. No,
did you go to CBGB's or Max's Kansas City at that stage?
the only time I ever made it to CBG, never made it to Max's. The only time I ever made it to CBGB's was I think late '80s, and it was on its last legs. Then it was just basically a toilet. But
Yes. So
they would do like hardcore matinees and stuff. It wasn't like going to see go to CB's and see the Blondie or whatever. No, it was interesting to see, what a tiny place it is. I'm like, oh God, we have better venues in Pittsburgh. But hey, I understand the importance of it and stuff. But no, I was never there to see anything important, or I was never there in its heyday. I was too young.
yes. So then as the 80s progressed, I mean, in this country, we had Thatcher, you had Reagan, then we had a
Hmm.
lot of unemployment in the UK in this sort of, especially the
Hmm.
early 80s, going into the sort of all through the decade, really,
Hmm.
under Margaret Thatcher's government. And
Hmm.
obviously there was always the threat of nuclear war. And also before then we had the Falkland crisis and then the miners' strike and massive problems with the unions and stuff like that. So there was a lot of poverty in the UK. What was your kind of early 80s like in Pittsburgh?
Like I said, I was happily ensconced in a upper class suburban neighborhood for a lot of that time, until I moved out and became a more city mouse like I've always been. I mean, even
Yes.
in the suburbs, I was a city mouse. I'm like, get me out of here. But yeah, of course, I've gone through similar things. Reagan was just as bad or worse than Thatcher, and I would argue that your Boris Johnson was, well, maybe not quite as bad as Trump. But there's always been
Yes.
strife, and always integral in the punk rock scene in the U.S. was like anti-Reagan stuff. He was one of our worst presidents ever. But I don't know. I don't remember like people being really like social class warriors like there was in England about the unemployment and stuff. People
Yes.
here were just like, everything sucks, but but, I don't remember really any social movement being involved in punk rock music like there was in England.
So when did you discover your singing voice? When did singing become part of your character and your life?
Well, someone would argue that I
Pardon?
still don't have a singing voice, but but no, I think as far back as I can remember, I mean, my mom has pictures of me when I was like 3 or 4 years old, just jumping on the kitchen table at my grandfather Pop's house and just dancing around singing "Hello, Dolly" or something. Just I don't know why. So that's why Pop gave me those records. He's like, oh, little Michael, he likes singing and dancing. Weirdo, look at him these records. So yeah, I
Right.
don't really think I ever really decided this is going to be by singing voice because it's changed depending on what band I was in. I'm still not afraid to sing like a girl, and I'm still not afraid to scream like a banshee. It just depends on me what the music is, whether I should scream or growl or sing or try to do a falsetto or whatever. But I pretty much I think I learned to sing just by imitating people because, like I said, my early bands in grade school, we did mainly covers because that's the only way that they would let you play at the school dance. You had to
Yes.
submit a set list, and they're like, "Well, if you're not doing the Doobie Brothers and Leonard Skinner, you can't play at our prom." And a lot of times, this is funny, that we would just lie. We would give them this set lesson, like, "Yeah, we're doing Long Train Time by the Doobie Brothers," and "Oh yeah, of course we're gonna do Free Bird." We would just totally lie, and then we would just go in there and play whatever the hell we wanted, even if it was just stuff we were just making up on the fly. We would
Yes.
just yell out chords: E, D, G, A, and then our guitar player would start like the first part of Free Bird, and everybody would be like, "Yeah." And then I would just totally mangle the words into some pornographic, horrible thing like, "If I bleep you tomorrow, will you fuck me today?" And these people, I remember we got this memo. No, it was a phone message. There's, of course, no internet or anything.
Yes.
And I think we got a written memo and a phone message the next day after we played this high school prom. Oh, it's so great. The Richland prom. And we played there. And they left me a phone message on my mom's phone. And they
Okay.
sent us a mail in the mail post. And they said, "Dear boat people, thank you for ruining our prom."
Yes. Not good.
Like, "Oh, we ruined the Richmond prom. Mission accomplished." I think they contractually still paid us though, or at least we took the money and run. I don't think
Yes.
they demanded a refund, but stuff like that was fun. But
And was the Boat People then? Was that your first band?
oh no, no, no! I was in tons of stupid cover bands. But there was one called Anthem that we had named after a Rush song. And
Right.
yeah, there were a bunch of like cover bands, but then the first band, yeah, that was really doing original material, I guess, was about people. Yeah.
And what year was that going out?
Ooh, that was let's see, it was before I was in 24 minutes. It would have been 79, maybe
Right.
80. Yeah, probably 78, 79, probably.
And then you said 70, was it 74
Well, no, it
minutes?
must have been 70 because when I went to see the Ramones, the bass player from the Boat People drove me to that show, so I was in the Boat People in '77. So yeah.
Yes. And did you record any material that's available anywhere?
Well, not that's available. It's like one of those things where there are so many cassettes, and then I was always one of those people that like once something's over, I was never like a pack rat and kept things around. And so the
Yes.
cassettes landed in a lot of different people's hands. Like I think all the cassettes that we recorded in the Boat People ended up in our keyboards player's hand, Rob Berger, and nobody knows whatever happened to him or what happened to the cassette. So stuff,
Oh,
things just get lost, along the way. But
yes. So then you had your next band. Was it 70? Oh my God, I can't remember now. 74.
oh, 24 minutes. Was it 24? Yeah, 24 minutes was one of the early ones. But before that, I was in a few bands with, well, Bill Von Hagen. I was in some Philly bands with him. One was called Dub Sex, that was short for dubious sexuality. And it was
Yes.
me and two girls. And we had no instruments except for the drums. And me and the two girls would play things like garbage can lids and stuff. And the songs were just basically like us saying catty, catty kind of very catty.
Oh, you just hit mute again. Don't hit mute if you can help it. That's not good. Are you off mute again? Oh, hello again. Good. We're back on.
All right, I'm sorry.
No, that's
Uh,
fine. That's fine. The
yeah,
mo-
the songs and the lyrics were mainly just catty gossip about people that we knew, and nobody would get it except our little circle of friends and stuff. And yeah, and then shortly after that, I was in a band with called 24 Minutes. That was really a mixture of all kinds of stuff. There's some live tapes available of that band that a guy named Mike Syke put up on YouTube, and I hear some of them now, and it's really amazing what we were doing, like a really weird cacophony of noise mixed with sort of, I don't know, like early rap ESG type stuff, and then mixed with like weird noisy pop songs. But throughout all of it was a really jaggedy, loud, tinny guitar, which I love.
yes. And so, what would I Google for that? 24 minutes. Oh, dude. Hello. Are you there?
Hello?
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. So I just was saying, and to find that interesting recording, what would one use to put in the search engine?
Oh, I can send you a link, but I think if you Google 24 Minutes on YouTube.
Brilliant. I'll do that. So then when did by 83, okay, hopefully you can hear me. The Cynics had started by then. When did you sort of first get to see them live?
Hello?
Hello again.
Wait, a YouTube video came up. I'm sorry, this is ridiculous. I have to turn off YouTube. There's a video of a puppy playing now.
Oh, yes, that's
Stop, stop.
and stop. Yes, it's all
Okay, I'm
good.
here.
Yes, good. No.
All right, good.
We used to love the Andrex advert with a puppy. Yes. So then, when did you start to sort of be aware? Because the Cynics started in 83, didn't they?
Yes, I was still in a band then called The Wake, uh, which actually, amazingly enough, had another Cynics drummer, Tom Hahn, who was the drummer that started playing with the Cynics on the third album, the Cynics rock and roll record. But I was in a band with him before the Cynics, a few years before, years before the Cynics, called The Wake. And so I was in The Wake, and yeah, I think the Cynics started shortly after that with a different singer who he's left this mortal coil now, Mark Kersman. He's gone like so many Cynics members. But anyway,
Yes.
I had seen the Cynics then when I was in The Wake, and Greg, my brother in arms, was also the sound guy for the Cynics. I'm not really sure how that happened, but he would do sound for us. And so I thought, Greg's a great guitar player, so I went to see his band, the Cynics. I'm like, wow, you guys are really good, but that singer. And then I don't know. It was like a couple years later, the Wake had broken up, and I was at some party with Greg, some house party. We were both tripping balls, and he asked me again. I'm like, yeah, but the singer, and he goes, well, why don't you do it, Boathead? I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. Sure. Actually, I was in a band called 96 Tears at that point. And he's
Right.
like, well, why don't you be the singer for the Cynics? I'm like, well, you are my favorite guitar player at Pittsburgh. I think I should give it a shot. And so I kind of unceremoniously quit 96 Tears, even though they were a great band. They were also on that same website that Mike Syke, Pittsburgh rock and roll. He has a bunch of uh, tapes, recordings of 96 Tears, the other band I was in right before the Cynics. But anyway, so
Right.
yeah, I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And so I went over to practice with them. And apparently, they didn't tell the other singer, Mark, that he was fired. Or either they told him and he just didn't pay attention to it. So I'm there practicing with him, and all of a sudden, Mark, the other singer, shows up and he goes, oh, that's cool. Two singers like Sam and Dave. I'm like, and Greg's like, no, not two singers.
Oh,
Did
dear.
you get the memo? You're not in the band. So but anyway, yeah, from then on it blossomed. Just
Yes.
Greg and I, the
Yes.
original.
Was it instant chemistry between the two of you?
I think it was always instant anti chemistry because we always kind of butted heads, but I mean, we're brothers. We're closer than brothers. Excuse me. People always used to say, "Wait, are you guys brothers? You have the same last name." Well, it's kind of interesting. We do. He's Ko and I'm Ka, and he has an H on the end. But we are really spiritually brothers, and will be forever because Kastelic, Kastelic, or Sam.
Yes.
It's,
There you
so
go.
yeah, it was a chemistry, anti-chemistry. We always used to laugh. It's like more like Jaggers Richards, or even more like the Davies brothers, where we would almost come to blows. Now I have
Yeah.
to say that Gregg never decked me. Thank God, because if he did, I would have been out. He's a big, strong guy. I would have been like, bite your arm off. No, we never got to physical blows, but actually mental blows and insulting each other can actually be way worse. And
Yes.
there have been so many times, when I felt, oh, I shouldn't have said that to him. That was really devastating. And it's the same to him, not saying stuff to me too, but in a way that always just, made us stronger. You're like, what else can we say to each other after? What else could we possibly be through at this point? And we've been through a lot. However, it seems like and it's been around for what, like 40 years now? I don't know, a long
Yes.
time.
So you've had a bit
Long
of a,
time.
I suppose, yes, that'll be an anniversary for you being in the band, actually, 40 years. So what was the first single? Was it Lying All the Time, the B-side of Summer's Gone, or was that your first single in the band? Because there'd been a few before you joined, like Painted My Heart and
I think the only one before I was in the band was the one Painted My Heart. That was the only single that I wasn't on. I think the single right after that might have been No Way.
Right.
Hello?
Yes,
And
I'm
then
here.
after that might have been Lying All the Time,
And then
I
there's
think.
no
No
place
Place
to
to
hide.
Hide. Right, right. Yeah, they all came very quickly, but they're all around that time, yeah. The
Wow.
only single I wasn't on was the Painted My Heart, and I believe it was either an instrumental on the other side, 69, or maybe something. Yeah, I don't know, a Chocolate Watch Band cover. Anyway,
Yes.
I was not on that, and I think that's the only official Cynics recording that I was not on.
Yes. Was there instant chemistry when you sort of took the mic? Did it all fall into place for the rest of the band?
No, no, we worked on it and worked on it, and that was kind of really new to me because Gregg was really a taskmaster back then. He was like, no, no, that's not. He would make us do the song over and over and over until it was to his liking. And a lot of time, we were always at heads because I'm like, you're playing too loud. How can I sing over this? And he's the one who told me, look, it's garage rock. You don't have to sing. Just scream. Just scream bloody murder like you've never screamed in your life. And that's, kind of where the iconic Michael K. screaming voice in the Cynics came from. It was just like, I would just start songs by going, what? Just screaming bloody murder as loud as I can just to see if I could hear myself through the monitors.
Yes, I know this is quite something. So your first album, which was titled Blue Train Station, this came out after a few years of being in the band. So had you done quite a lot of touring and rehearsing before that? That kind of going into the studio to record that album.
We had done a lot of gigs, local gigs. We didn't really start doing a lot of touring until after that album came out. Because then, thanks to Gregg's hard work and really starting to get hit records, going and stuff, we had discovered that you could actually get radio airplay all across America by sending promo records to college radio stations. And
Yes.
so the Cynics, like from the first record, Blue Train Station, and the second record, and especially by the time rock and roll came out in 1990, we were kind of a fixture in college radio stations, big college radio stations, if you could call college radio stations big, but at that time they were only really radio stations that were relevant. No commercials, actually played music without set corporate playlists. And so we would, keep in touch with them, sending them free records, sending them promo stuff, sending them, of course, no email, no internet or anything. We would send them postcards and newsletters. Here's what we're up to. Hey, we're thinking about playing Tuscaloosa. We want to come visit the radio station. They're like, yeah, sure, come to the radio station. We'll interview and stuff. So it was kind of really grassroots, early college radio that really helped us touring the United States. And
Yes.
by the time 89, 80, 88, 89, we were doing traveling all the way across the country, which grueling. Just playing places, whether people wanted to see us or not, we were just doing it. Because when you're that age, everything's an adventure. You know, I wasn't
Massive.
so much a prima donna then. It wasn't like I was demanding a 5-star hotel room like I do now. We were just sleeping on people's floor. We went from one side of the country to the other side of the country in a cargo van with no air conditioning and no windows. And
Yes.
you could barely breathe with the farts and the smell. And we used to cherish a traffic jam just so we could open the side door to get some air because there were no back windows in this cargo van. And there were no seats either, which actually was an advantage because we would just throw, some pillows back there and a bunch of sleeping bags just to try to hold the gear in place. Or the back line, as you call, I guess you called the gear, but just hold the
Yes.
amps and drums in place. We throw sleeping bags and pillows, and we'd just be laying back there, and people taking turns getting up front in the passenger seat. I believe it's usually Gregg driving, although sometimes we would get some poor sucker to go along with us, and they're like, "Yeah, I'd love to roadie and drive." Little did they know what they were getting in for, but
Yes.
anyway, they
Absolutely.
were like I said, it's really amazing that we survived without having we've witnessed horrible accidents all over the interstate and stuff, and we came very, very close to so many, and yet somehow we remained unscathed. I mean, I've had my accidents on stage and off and stuff, but touring and stuff, but we've never really been in anything that was life threatening or anything that
Yes.
actually ended in our lives. But
Did
although
you
I think
help?
I came close.
Did you help set up the record label as well, which was Get Hip Records, or was that just Greg?
The original three of us well, of course, it was Gregg's ingenuity who really started it up, but he roped me because I actually had a job that then. I was actually getting paid pretty well for working at this liberal organization raising money for liberal things like Planned Parenthood at ACLU. But anyway, I was making some money, and Bill, our drummer, Bill Von Hagen, the original drummer, who I said had been in bands with me before that, we both
Yes.
had money from our jobs. And Gregg enlisted us to we got to start this label, and what I need from you guys is money. So Bill and I would give him like half of our paycheck all the time for him to set up the label, which was perfectly fine with me. I was living at home. And I'm like, this is not going to hurt me at all to give this money up and have it start our own label so we don't have to count out at anyone and we can put out our records if we want. And so then, Bill and I would both work there, on a volunteer basis, a lot for free. And then
Yes.
later on, when Greg got more serious, I quit my job and started working at Get Hit full time for a while. And eventually, I just got, it's the music industry is so tiring. I mean, I love talking to the people in the stores and stuff, but and I do love music, but I'm not someone like Greg who can just live and breathe music all the time. Sometimes I just go through phases where I just can't even stand to listen to music because I'm like,
Yes.
just I don't need that in my life right now. Can I watch Doc Martin? Yeah, I like the BBC shows. I love your Absolutely Fabulous show. I watch that or like Doc Martin and just like it's a sedative. I'm like, okay, I'm done with music for a while. I want to watch some telly.
Yes. And your band also, you had a keyboard player, Becky Smith was on keyboards at this stage?
Yeah, she's great. She's still doing fine. She lives in New York, or New York State at least. And
Did
yeah,
she
she
keep
was. I actually lived with her for quite a while. We lived on Millionaires Row in Pittsburgh on Forbes Avenue. I don't know how we locked up and rented this mansion. Just a few of us rented this mansion. It was only like a few $100 a month after we split it up. But it's this beautiful mansion on Fifth Avenue, and that also turned into the Cynics practice space. That basement is where we wrote all of the rock and roll album, which people
right.
seem to agree. We wrote that entire record in the basement of that house. That house was so weird. It was full of taxidermy because the one guy that lived there, Steve Scleroff, was really into taxidermy. So it looked like a cross between the Addams Family house and some like haunted house of wax. We did not have a single white light bulb in that house. All the light bulbs were like red and blue, and the practice space was this basement. It was very humid, so I had to have a dehumidifier put in there that would drain into a toilet, so the amps would be okay because it was like damp and almost rain. It really was like a cave, and
Yes.
it was dark, but it was really this great atmosphere where we really didn't feel like we had to prove anything because we could play as loud as we want. It was we put mattresses on the roof and everything in the floor, so we were pretty secluded down there. We could play as loud as well, and also it was such a free atmosphere because it was our whole house. We could take a break and go upstairs, have a drink, go back downstairs. It wasn't like any constricted time that you have to be in or out of this practice space because it was just ours, you know? And I think
Yes.
that was a really good creative atmosphere that the reason that record came out so well. And also another reason is that while we were doing that, we were also playing a lot of shows locally and, at least regionally. And so we got to really work out those songs live a lot before we went into the studio to record the rock and roll LP because Becky Smith had actually quit the band by the time we recorded
Yes.
the rock and roll.
Was that a bit of
She
a
wanted
shock when
something
she
fresh.
left?
Pardon me?
I said, was that a shock that when she left?
No, 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 no. We knew it was coming, and I didn't want it to happen, but I think she felt that she was kind of pushed out because we were going into more of a rock and roll direction, and
Right.
she was more into the 60s organ heavy vibe. But she plays on at least a few songs on the rock and roll records, it's her playing organ and stuff. But by the time that record came out, she was like, I think I don't think I want to be in this band anymore. It's really loud for me.
Yes. And did
But
she, because she started, or did she go and work in Bellwether Gallery in New York? Was that her next?
I
mu-
know it was in a gallery. I don't know if that name, but it must be. You must be right. Yeah.
Yes, I just wondered
Yeah,
what
I
she.
think that was her. I think she started that gallery, or she started another gallery after that. But yeah, that was her.
And she's doing, and she's keeping well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Last I heard from her, she's doing great.
That's good. It's always nice to hear. So yeah, so you did, in the UK, most bands, as you can imagine, have that quite a tight 5 years. Because we've got a DJ, what we used to, John Peel on BBC Radio
Yeah.
1 used to be quite the go-to place. So a lot of bands who started would eventually get that single, give it to John Peel, and he would sort of give it a spin if it was interesting, and then they get a John Peel
Mhm.
session, which was a 4-track kind of session that they do at the Maida Vale Studios at the BBC,
Mhm.
often produced by a member of Mott the Hoople, which was quite exciting. And then they would get the sort of the transit van around the country. First album going well, second album, can be even better. Third album can be a bit tricky. So you by the third
Mhm.
album, because you did Blue Train Station, 12 Flights Up,
Mhm.
and then Rock and Roll. So by then you were on quite a roll at this point, weren't you?
Yeah, we were very shocked about the great response of the first two records, and then rock and roll came out, and there was, even though it's the biggest and best, there was a backlash towards that record from the what would you call it, the real purist '60s crowd. They're like, "Oh, they're not 60s garage anymore. I don't know what they're doing. This isn't garage. I don't know what it is with this rock stuff." So there was a slight backlash from the purists, which I
Yes.
think wore off very quickly, after they saw us and they're like, "Eh, it still is garage." But yeah. So it was interesting to hear the back people that were like really big fans of 12 Lights Up expected us to do, a record more like that, like, kind of regular 60s thing, but we were already, feeling our oats,
Yes. And how did
branched
you
out.
towards yeah, so then how did you as sort of the 80s, for me, I was a real indie pop kid during that period. I loved the Smiths and I loved all those bands like that Petrol Emotion and Lloyd Cole and all that kind of stuff that we love. But then sort of as the 80s progressed, there was the ecstasy period and dance music, and then you had Seattle grunge scene coming in. So how did you then navigate after, that album and Learn to Lose, which came out in the sort of early 90s?
Oh, man. Well, the fall has always been a guiding North Star to me. But I think after the rock and roll record came out and we got so much attention, I think that unfortunately we were courted by some music people that were possibly unscrupulous and lying to us and say, "Hey, we could get you a contract here at this record or this record, but we want you to be more accessible." And I think we were kind of strayed away from when we recorded that Learn to Lose record. A lot of people gave us notes. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, too many notes. They were like, "Oh, the vocals are terrible, caterwauling," or, "Oh, the guitar's not loud enough." And I think it was really overthought and overmixed and overdone, where it really just came out as somebody called it like, "Well, wait, this sounds like Bachman Turner Overdrive." Which I
Excellent.
take exception to because actually, in retrospect, my mom says it's still her favorite Cynics record, and a lot of people do really like Learn to Lose, and I like it now. When I listen to it, I'm like, you know what? There's really a lot of good stuff on here. What's wrong with it? But I think when it came out, a lot of people were kind of disappointed at being the fourth record, and they thought it was gonna be I don't know what they thought it was gonna be. I don't know what I thought it was gonna be, but I think it suffered from but my point is I think it suffered from being thought about too much and overwrought, and instead of just recording it and putting it out, I think it was really slaved over because, we had these, people dangling us, "Well, you could be on Sony Record, but you should have this guy mix it or have this guy look at it." I think we listened too much of that instead of, just listening to ourselves and just putting it out ourselves, which ended up
Yes.
happening anyway, but unfortunately, the damage was already done at that point.
Yeah, and because then you had quite a few more personnel changes before you sort of did the follow-up album, Get Our Way. Did that sort of
Mhm.
were people sort of I don't know, were they sort of fatigued at this point?
By people? You
Yeah,
mean who?
yeah,
The band?
yes, the bass
People in
player.
general?
No,
Me?
just the band. No, the band. Did
Oh, the band.
you?
Well, well, who was the band was pretty much new at that point. It was me and Greg, and we had a new drummer, little Max Terrasaro, new bass player, Davey, another dead member, unfortunately, God rest his soul. But yeah, so no, to us, to Greg and I, we were like, this is great. It was like for us, every time we get new rhythm section, it's like starting over for us. We're like, oh, this is exciting. And Max was just like a little load of energy. He was like came out of the door like Keith Moon. We're like, okay, this is fun. And then
Yes.
Dave, the really good bass player. So we had a lot of fun writing those songs, yeah, and we toured with them a lot too. We toured almost the whole states with them. I remember playing with Maxie and Davey, like in Texas and stuff. I think we had a van with windows at that point, which is good because they were kind of stanky. But I don't mean playing wise. I mean, yeah, change
Yes.
underwear. But but yeah, playing with them was like a complete joy. I think they're the only that's the only album that they were actually on. But they were in the band for quite a while, and they were
Yes.
great to play with.
And then when that had sort of come out and you did the tour, then what happens for the next kind of chapter of the band? Because is there a bit of a gap at this point, isn't there?
Oh, that is when that happened. Yeah,
Yes, and we
yeah.
in this because you'd had the grunge period, which had a massive impact, but then you started getting all those chaps in, I don't know, check shirts with their baseball caps and, I don't know, cut off shorts, sort of swinging, with their Jack Daniels bottles, singing about their
Hmm.
stepfathers in small town America. There was quite a lot of hideous kind of grunge bands at this stage. And in this country, we had Britpop with Blur and Oasis. So how did you sort of feel during the mid-90s?
Well, everything grunge except for Mudhoney, everything, all those grunge bands just sounded to me like really bad Leonard Skinner. I mean,
Yes.
Soundgarden, I don't care, Soundgarden, or who's that other band? I'm still alive.
I think the Pearl
I'm like,
Jam.
yeah, I don't see any difference between Pearl Jam and really terrible Leonard Skinner music. So I never really got that at all. But what happened with our right then was that I ended up in jail for a bit of time, and I stopped working at Get Hip, and you know go through some fake rehabs that obviously took not,
Yes.
but
Hmm.
yeah, it was like one of those periods in my life was like, music is not really interesting to me at this point.
No. How long did you spend in
That's
jail, by the way?
uh only, I think, 90 days total. It was like 30 days in county jail, not prison. It was just, 30 days in jail, and then 30 days in mandatory lockdown. Oh, no, 90 days in mandatory lockdown rehab. And then after the mandatory rehab, I had to go to all these classes. And oh, no, there was a halfway house. I had to stay in a halfway house for like 60 days, and I was allowed to go out and work. Thank God my friend Gary gave me a job at his tattoo place. That's a whole nother story. One of my most hilarious jobs, being a receptionist at the tattoo place. But anyway, if you put all those months together, it was like a long time, like half a year, when I was in and out of these incarceration things, and just not really doing music stuff, not even really listening to music, just
No.
reading, thinking about stuff, and trying to
Had
find
you
out
had
how
you
I
sort
can
of
get a drink without being drug tested.
right. Had you got was it drug related, your sort of kind of period during the sort of mid-90s?
No, unbelievably, no. I never got busted for drugs. Actually, I got busted for DUI like
Oh,
3 times, and once the third time, they're like, "Okay, you're going to jail." So
yes.
it was,
Blimey.
yeah, it was just that. It was just the booze. But they're serious about the laws,
Y-
3 strikes and you're out, baby. It's like
y-
a year of your life is either, even if you're not incarcerated the whole time, you're obligated to do all this other stuff.
Right. It was heavy drinking.
Well, that's never changed, but so that's just shows to go. You have what good rehab does. I think it's all a bunch of BS, especially AA. I mean, if you're gonna drink, you're gonna drink. I don't care what the hell they tell you and try to uh, tell you whether it's gonna kill you or not. I remember the big AA thing. They're like, okay, you're gonna end up in 3 places, either institutionalized or incarcerated or dead. And I'm like, well, I've done 2 of them so far. Why not keep going, right? I'm
Yes.
going for the trifecta. Still, I haven't hit the third one yet.
That's tricky, isn't it? That's tricky. So when you came out and having to go through that process, how do you navigate the rest of the 90s?
Oh, for a while, I was in this really great band called Honeyburst. It was like during the Cynics break. Am I still there?
Yeah, yeah, you're still here.
Okay, good. During the Cynics break, I was in this band called Honeyburst, and they were really fun. It was like a really kind of poppy, rocky band, and all original material. And we had really lots of good times touring the whole country. Like, we went on a couple tours with a band called the Leaving Trains, a couple tours with the Flesh Tones. I mean, you know
Oh
them, of
yes,
course.
the Flesh Tones.
Yeah, this manager, Dave Kaplan, who booked at this big agency, I called him when I was in Honeyburst, and I was like, "Hey, I know you booked the Flesh Tones and Demolition Doll Rods and all these bands and stuff. Would you be interested in booking some shows for Honeyburst? I'll send you your tape." And he's like, "I have a better idea. I want to put you on a double bill with some of my best bands. I'm going to put you on a double bill with the Lehman Trains. I know you're friends with Falling James. I'm going to put you on a double bill with the Flesh Tones tour. I know you're friends with Peter. I'm going to put you on a tour with the Demolition Doll Rods. I know you're friends with them." And so he would put us on tour with these other bands, and it would be good for everybody because with me on the bill and those other band, the other band, they say Michael from the Cynics and also the Flesh Tones, it would help pump up the audience, you know, and it was really fun for us, fun for me. I mean, to play with some of my idols on a regular basis and get to hang out with them. So yeah,
Yes,
Honeyburst was a really fun band. So I did that for I don't know, like 3 years.
that's
And
pretty
then
good.
what happened is in 2000, I think it was 2000, we started getting these offers from festivals, and we would turn them down and turn them for the Cynics. I mean, would get
Yes.
off, and we would turn them down. Greg was like, "Nah." I'd be like, "Well, whatever." Finally, we got an offer for a festival in Las Vegas, like Las Vegas Grind or something, and we were like, "Okay, we'll do it." So the Cynics played a show at a festival in Las Vegas, and that was in 2000. And yeah, then when we after we did that, it just turned out so great. The response was amazing, and it was like we didn't lose a step. You know, Greg and
Yes.
I, the songs were just like, you know, muscle memory. Even though we hadn't played in years and years, they just came back. You know, just like magic. It's something that you never get out of your head. You know, once you learn it, it's just there.
Yes.
So then we just went gangbusters after that and started recording and touring again.
So this is Living is the Best Revenge was your next album.
Yes, yes.
And what was
That's the
your
bass player. That's what the bass player from Honeyburst was in
right?
that. Yeah.
God, which one? The bass player. Who's the bass player?
Smith Hutchings was in
Oh,
Honeyburst,
Smith Harper Hutchins.
and yes, and then he became the bass player for the Cynics after I defected from Honeyburst. Or actually, I wanted to keep Honeyburst going, but the guitar player from Honeyburst says you have to do one or the other. I don't know. Maybe I made the bad choice. I maybe should have stuck with Honeyburst, but no, I kid. But
No.
so yeah, Honeyburst was done, but Smith went with me to go to the Cynics thing, the dark
Yes.
side.
My God. So then it was all back on again. So then was the band, was it more of a, not part-time sort of occupation, but was it the case that you sort of all kept your day jobs and sort of did the band as a sort of another project rather than it being a full-time gig?
I don't know what you classify as day job, but for Greg, it was his day job because Get Hip is his day job. So Get Hip Cynic, same thing. So
Yes.
Greg still hasn't quit his day job and never will. He's going to go to his casket with that giant warehouse full of Get Hip records, and God bless him. And and Smith, we had interesting day jobs because Smith was more like, yeah, he owned like an art gallery, museum and stuff. So it wasn't like a day job where he had to be there and stuff. We're pretty much, full in on it that the Cynics were what we did, you know.
Yes. So then, coming up to the next couple of releases, there's Here We Are and then Spinning the Wheel Motel. Was that by then, was the band very much kind of on a even keel and you were sort of using it as much more of a, yes, we've got ourselves a bit of a pattern here and a bit of a formula. And yes, you were able to keep it rolling quite nicely without too many disasters.
No, I think there was a bit of a pause after Living is the Best Revenge, where once again the band was just back to Greg and I, and we had some songs and some ideas that we wanted to do, and our manager, Barbara, Gregg's wife, had booked us some studio time in Gijón, Spain. And she said, okay, you're going to the studio. You're going to be here for a few weeks. This is where you're doing. Just bring in your songs and you're going to record them there. And we're like, with who? And she goes, don't worry. The studio has some musicians for you there. And Gregg was like, no, I'm not going. I'm not doing it. I'm not going. I'm not doing it. And I'm like, look, I have a bunch of song ideas and I can't wait to go to Gijón and hang out. So I'll bring my songs and I'll go into the studio and just do it. And then at the last minute, Gregg said, okay, I'll go too. So we go to the studio and the guy who runs the studio, God, I got to remember his name to give him credit because he still runs it, the studio in Gijón. But he introduced us to two musicians that were in his band, and that would be Angel, the bass player, and Pablo Gonzalez, Pablo, the drummer. That was the first time we ever met them.
Oh,
I mean, well, it turned out it wasn't the first time we ever met them because when they were just mere lads, teenagers, they showed me pictures of like of the little bass player uh, Angel, he was like in the front row singing along with me. I put the microphone in front of his face. They would see us in Spain, and he was in the front row at the show, both of them, Pablo and so we didn't even know that they had seen us when they were kids, but they were just happy to like play with us, and we're like, okay, let's try these guys out. And it turns out, we just started playing some of the songs, and it was just so naturally, it just fell into place. We're like, okay, these guys are just the greatest, and
yes.
they are still in the band to this day. That they're on that record, and we've never had another band since. I mean, we've had some fill-in people to do different shows when they weren't available, but they still live in the same town, or in northern Spain, in Gijón and Oviedo, right in northern Spain. That's still where they live and reside. But we've never had an official rhythm section except for them since. So they've really been in the band much longer than any any other members that we've ever had.
Oh, that's
And plus,
fantastic.
they always, even when I look at them now, they just seem like little pups to me. I don't even know how old they are, but to me, they always just seem like little children. And I just love hanging around them so much because they both get along so together, and they both understand Gregg and I and our proclivities in weird ways, and they get along together. Like they get along. Pablo and Pible get along, or Pablo and Angel get along like brothers, like Gregg and I do. They're just like brothers, They can have their little fights and spat and stuff, but they'll always put their heads on each other's shoulders in the van when we've all had enough.
Yes.
So they're just the cutest. Man, I've never been happier with any lineup because there really isn't any strife or stress between any of us at this point. Because you get to a point where why bother getting worked up about it? I mean, I'll still
Yes.
get really worked up if I think I had a bad night or did a bad show, or if I think the guitar was too loud or the sound was messed up, and I just can't sleep and grind my teeth about it all night until the next day when we play again and it's a great show. And I'm like, okay, everything's fine. All's forgotten. But
Yes.
other than that, we're just floating along like we've never been better as a band.
Yeah. So
Playing, writing
Spinning Wheel Motel then, which has came out in 2011. Was there any other releases after that, or is that the kind of last one that you've done as a band?
a new one's coming soon. It's hard to believe it was that long ago, but it still sounds very fresh. That was a really great recording experience because we did that, of course, with the famous Dr. Detroit, Jim Diamond,
Yes.
who we are working with now. We're working on new songs, recording with him, Jim Diamond, to do a follow up to Spinning Wheel. But it was so wonderful. We just drove to Detroit, not too far from Pittsburgh. Well, we had the boys fly in from Spain, practiced a few times, drove to Detroit. We recorded that whole Spinning Wheel record in like 2 days because Jim Diamond's it was his studio, Ghetto Recordings, doesn't exist anymore thanks to Detroit city gentrification. He was priced out of his neighborhood, so the studio's no more. But yeah, we just went in to Ghetto Recordings. He has Jim, at that point, he had everything in his studio the way he wanted. Here's the drums you're going to use. Here's the amps you're going to use. I know what this was going to sound like. Bam, bam, bam. We just went in there. We just laid down the tracks, and then I think we spent like half a day, like me doing the vocals, and then a little mixing, and then I think later Gregg and Jim like went back and did some more remixing and stuff. But the main thing was done in like a couple days or like a long
Yes.
weekend. So it felt pretty effortless, and I think the results were really really good. But see, Jim's a genius, and especially if you get someone who's working in their own environment, in a studio like that he was so used to getting things down and getting them down quickly. And it wasn't even a matter of budget. Get Hip had enough money we could have stayed there for months and recorded. It wasn't that. It's just when you take too long to record, I think you're going to end up with something like a Learn to Lose, something that sounds like a little too overwrought,
Mm.
So it was really great to get it done, in a weekend, and bam, bam, bam,
It's
there it
done.
is.
It's in the bag. Then what sort
Mm.
of then do you sort of with the band, because that was quite a few years ago, or decade, do you then sort of just keep the band ticking over, playing the odd live date, and then just wombling through life, as we say, or just doing other projects?
Oh, we've done long tours. I mean, even just recently, we'll go over to Europe for like a month. And I'm like, oh, that's a little long. Can't we just do a couple weeks here and there? And we're trying to keep it more to like, since we don't have a new release yet, we're trying to keep it to mainly just, festival or so. We do like a couple weeks, like in two big festivals, and do a nice big set in front of huge crowds and stuff. But there were also places that constantly want us, and I wouldn't want it any less. I mean, there's always places in Spain that we can play, and it's really,
Yes.
really our home. And there's always places, that once in a while I'll have us like Mexico City or some place will always be like, oh, you should come over here and do a week, and it'll be like smaller clubs and stuff. But if it's worthwhile, well, one of the last tours we did was pretty long for us. So I think it was like almost 3 weeks or so. We did all over Scandinavia and Germany and Norway. Well, I guess that's Scandinavia. I don't know, all these Scandinavia places, and I think even a couple shows in Spain and Germany and places. But that was a great tour we had the great sound guy, driver Magnus.
Yes.
Just amazing. Every show was so great because he's the greatest live sound man. I don't know how he does it, but he just made us sound amazing, and it was just really fun. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, no, we still do long tours. I mean, it's not like a big blown out, a lot of publicity about it, but that Scandinavian tour, let's see. Okay, I'm saying recently, but I guess it was like a year ago. It was like last
Yes.
May, not this past May. I think the May before that. But to me, it seems like yesterday because by the time you get home, you're like, whoa, man, I forgot what my bed felt like.
So when have you started recording or writing the new material for the next
Yes.
album?
Yes, we've recorded some songs with the Spaniards. This past winter, we recorded some songs in Youngstown, Ohio, of all places. Steel Belt Place, an hour outside of Pittsburgh, dying old Rust Belt steel place, Youngstown, perfect for us. And Jim Diamond came down from Detroit or Europe, wherever he lives now. I think he might still live somewhere in Detroit, but he also, he lives all over the world producing and stuff. So he came down, and we did a lot of basic tracks and even some vocals and stuff at the studio in Youngstown. And now that is sitting there waiting for us to complete. And so far in the timeline, from what I've heard, we're going to try to complete it in May. So, like in
Right.
a month or so, we're going back to Youngstown, trying to finish up the recording, see what we got there. And, who knows
Yes.
from that. But that's the plan.
And obviously you've got the record label. Who does the artwork for the releases? Who's the driving force behind that?
Oh, wow. A lot of people. I think the final word is always up to Gregg, but we're very lucky to always have really talented people do our work. Like in the beginning, it was like Steve Magee, one of our other really weird members who nobody even knows what happened to him, the original bass player, or one of the original bass players, the guy with the really long hair. He used to do the psychedelic covers and stuff. But then Gregg is always good at finding people, that can do stuff for us. Like the spinning wheel record is just an amazing, I think, the artwork with the die cut and the wheel you can spin and stuff. And
Yes.
there's so many hidden messages and stuff. It's a big gatefold record, and the lyrics are in there. It's just a beautiful piece of work, very expensive too. Gatefold, die cut, spinning wheel, costs a lot of money. And I was not for it. I was like, can't we just make it simple, like a fall record? How about just have it black with the Cynics in red letter Helvetica print? Can we just do that so we can get it out? Like, no, no, no. And Gregg always really fights and tries to make a lot more the covers a lot more intricate. And thank God he does, because if it was up to me, yeah, like all our records would just look like some sort of generic bootleg of the Buzzcocks. Okay, here's the color, here's the logo, bing, bang, boom. But no, Gregg really does spend a lot of time and thought into it. So yeah, I would say even more than the artists, Gregg really does have the final word on the artwork, as he should.
Yes.
He's the label owner, and he has good taste. I gotta admit, even though I was against him sometimes, but it should be simple. But no, he was like, let's make it interesting. And even if I was against it at the time, uh, in retrospect, when I look at him, I'm like, you know what? That's a really nice looking record. I would
Yes.
buy that. I would buy that just on the look of the cover, But yeah,
Mhm.
so my answer to your question, I think Gregg pretty much is the arbiter in the end of the covers. But we've had a lot of really great artists, and yeah, like I said, the spinning wheel. Shout out to Vicky Vaden, great artist, originally from Atlanta. Not sure where she lives now. Maybe San Diego, but anyway, beautiful, beautiful artist. She did the spinning wheel thing.
God, that is quite incredible, actually. Yes, and if you could have whispered some to your like 16-year-old self starting out, is there any words of wisdom that you would have just said, yes, this would have been a good idea, or not sure about that one, mate? Is there any sort of, because you've had a lot of experience, haven't you? You've had a lot of ups and downs, and
Yeah.
a couple. Anyway, yes. Is there anything that you would have whispered to your 16-year-old self, even if that person would have probably ignored you?
My 16-year, well, I don't have a time machine, but gosh, if I was my 16-year-old self, I would have told myself, don't be so uptight about stuff. Take another Valium, just calm down, have another drink. Don't be so self-conscious. Just do what you want, you know? Because,
Yes.
I mean, we all have great anxiety. And 16? My God, I was full of anxiety. Well, yeah, come to think, yeah, I was still getting had people like punch me in the face for having polka dotted hair at 16. So if I was going to tell my 16-year-old self something, I'd be like, chill out, man. It's not going to always be like this. It's just going to get better and better and better.
Yes. Well,
I
that's
always used to laugh when people would say to like gay kids, like, it gets better, it gets better. I was always like, no, it doesn't. It just gets worse. Don't lie. Don't lie and say it gets better. It just gets worse. But it's not true. It really does get better, kids.
yes. Well,
I'll tell
that's
my 16-year-old self that. Don't worry, Michael. It might get a little worse at some point, but overall it'll get better. But I couldn't, when I was 16, I mean, I couldn't imagine that I would be alive at 60. I mean, I was just a snot-nosed, slightly overprivileged little punk, and I was like, hope that I'm dead by 24. I don't be an old man at 24. I don't give a shit. I'm sorry. I just want to be dead. Hope I die before I get old. So yeah, if I was 16, I was like, look, give it at least till 26 and decide.
yes.
Give it
Amazing.
another 10 years, Michael.
And when you're not in the Cynics doing
Mhm.
that, what else do you sort of fill your time up with? Do you have other projects or other interests?
Well, I have my OnlyFans. I'll send you a link. And I have my working on a memoir. It's
Excellent.
very interesting. It's still in sketchy points. I got that app Scribner, and God, I have so many stories to sort through and do that. And like I told you, I also love my programs. I like watching TV,
Yes.
and listening to music now too. I'm getting back into music and stuff, but yeah, and also, still always in the back of my mind is trying to, figure out new song ideas and lyrics for the Cynics too. That's always something that's, I'm constantly working on and also constantly rejecting too. I look at it and I'm like, what is this piece of garbage? But it's just something you have to do, kind of on a daily basis to weed out the garbage. And every once in a while you come across a gem like, oh, that'd be a good song title. And then,
Yes.
go from there, but,
I guess, and the most well, one of the most important relationships is with Gregg. I guess the two of you are the Cynics, really, aren't you?
yeah, brothers in arms.
Does that feel quite surreal that you've been, together for over 40 years?
It really does, but it also seems completely natural. Like I said, he's, just always there, and I guess I'm always there for him. I mean, whether it's to his chagrin or not.
Yes.
Yeah, Boathead's always there, and I'm like, Greg's always there. So it's like we've never ever felt abandoned. We always know that we're there for each other, and we always know that we'll play together forever, until one of us drops dead,
Yes.
which
Do
could
you
be
have any
imminent or not.
and do you have any live dates coming up this year?
Well, we're gonna see if the Spanish boys come over in May and we start recording and stuff. We'll probably do a few U.S. dates then while they're here, just to take advantage of that. There are rare times when they're here, but as far as the other things go, we'd have to talk to Barbara, our manager. She'll always come up with something like, "Oh, they want you to play this festival in Italy." I'm like, so anything like that could come up at any time. So, but nothing
Yes.
actually planned. No firm dates yet. No.
Interesting, isn't it? And were you pleased with the results for the new album? And do you have a title for it?
So far, I love the results. I have an idea for the title, but I don't know if it's agreed on, so I'm not going to say it yet. So,
Yes.
yeah,
It's always so
I'm not
true.
going to say it's going to be called this. I think we'll all decide. One thing we always kind of agree on is that every album title should be 3 words. I think with
Oh,
any band, any album should be 3 words. Ours usually are Blue Train Station, Get Our Way, Learn to Lose, Rock and Roll. I always try to keep to the rule of threes. So it's going to be 3 words. That's the only hint I'll give you.
oh, good. Well, that's really groovy. And also, actually, this is one thing I was going to ask you, just because often one gets this slightly wrong, especially being English. How do you pronounce your surname in a groovy way?
Oh, my name, it's always been pronounced Kastelic, and Greg's is Kostelich. Slightly different, the accents in this KO instead of KA. But my name is long, since I've been a kid, I've always been called Michael Kastelic. Although
Yes.
Peter Zarimba from the Tones always calls me Kastelic. Kastelic, what are
Kirsten.
you doing over there, Kastelic? Either
Uh,
way, I always just go by Michael K because,
Michael K.
I don't think there's any other Michael K. I don't have to make people say Kastelic.
Kastelic. And how do you,
We did
how do you,
find out that both Greg and I are from Croatian origin, and we didn't find out actually till we went to Croatia and we played in Croatia and we go over the border. And this is when they had borders in Europe. They don't really much, well, as you know, they don't pretty much anymore. But we were going over the border, I think from Italy to Croatia, and they asked for our passports and stuff. And the Croatians took our passports at the border, and they look at Greg's, and they look at mine, and they go, Kastelic, Kastelic. They're like, welcome home, welcome home. And we're like, what? Then we got to this hotel room, And I look in the phone book. I don't even remember why. I look at the phone book, and there's like 3 pages of Kastelics and Kostelich's in the like Croatian Zagreb phone book. And I'm like, oh my God, I was always told we were like German or Polish or something. And then Greg always, I think it was mainly on his mother's side, was always told he was Italian. But it turns out our paternal families were from Croatia. So we were really welcomed back home in Croatia.
Oh my God, that's so. And was that quite an emotion? Did it feel quite emotional?
Oh yeah, I broke down and cried. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I was just like, wow, mind blown. But yeah, no,
Yes.
it really made us appreciate being there a lot more. And the people that welcomed us there were just so wonderful. And we ate dinner at this one of the promoters' family, and his mom and dad reminded me exactly of my grandmother and my pop on my dad's side. I'm like, oh my God, you're like my grandfather and pop. I think they kind of took offense because he thought, well, we're not that old. They were the promoter's parents, so they were probably more like my age than my grandparents. But I said, oh, you remind me so much of Grandma and Pop. And they're like, what? But anyway, that was just delicious food and so friendly. Beautiful, beautiful country.
Yes, that's indeed. And that is the end of the interview. A massive thank you to Michael from the Cynics for giving me the time for that interview. If you want to know any more information, they have a very good Facebook page. And also, there's another website, Get Hip, which is gethip.com, which has a little bit more information about the band. Anyway, this has been the C86 Show. David Easter. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived, so you can find those on Spotify, iTunes and Podbean. It's true. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.